A 25-year-old woman was killed and at least 10 people wounded in a shooting terror attack Sunday afternoon at the Beersheba Central bus station in southern Israel. The terrorist, a Bedouin man with Israeli citizenship, carried out the attack across multiple areas and was neutralized by security forces who happened to be at the scene. Magen David Adom treated the injured on site before transferring them to Soroka Hospital. One person remains in serious condition and another 4 in moderate condition. Large police forces arrived at the scene and scanned the area for additional terrorists before concluding the security incident was over. Israel's security forces are on high alert for potential terrorist attacks ahead of the one-year anniversary of October 7th. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the Israeli public following the Jewish New Year and said Israel is preparing to respond to the Islamic Republic of Iran's missile attack, the largest ballistic missile attack against Israel in history. Reports indicate the IDF is preparing a broad response and the list of potential targets is long. All the details in the following report.
Israel is preparing a significant retaliation to the Islamic Republic of Iran's largest ever ballistic missile strike on Israel.
איראן כבר פעמיים שיגרה על שטחנו ועל ערינו מאות טילים, בהתקפת טילים בליסטיים מהגדולה בהיסטוריה. אף מדינה בעולם לא הייתה מקבלת התקפה כזאת על עריה ואזרחיה, וגם לא מדינת ישראל. לישראל החובה והזכות להגן על עצמה ולהגיב על התקפות אלה, וכך נעשה.
According to reports, Israel remains poised to strike in the coming days, and potential targets could range from military bases to intelligence centers to Iran's oil refineries and even potentially its nuclear sites. Last week, millions of Israelis were forced into bomb shelters as the Islamic Republic launched over 200 ballistic missiles, marking the second time since October 7th Iran has attacked Israel directly from its soil. Israel's defensive capabilities largely thwarted the attack, resulting in 0 Israeli casualties, though a few missiles managed to penetrate, hitting military bases and homes. Despite this, the IDF announced on Saturday night that Israel's military and Air Force bases were operating as usual.
היו מספר פגיעות במרכז הארץ, באזורים אזרחיים, היו גם פגיעות בבסיסי חיל האוויר, בנבטים ותל נוף. פגיעות אלו לא פגעו במטוסים ולא פגעו בקשירות חיל האוויר. בסיסי חיל האוויר, גם נבטים ותל נוף, מתפקדים באופן מלא. מיד לאחר המתקפה, מטוסי חיל האוויר המשיכו לתקוף במזרח התיכון ותוקפים גם ברגעים אלה.
Indeed, over the weekend, the IDF did not let up and continued striking Iran's terror proxies throughout the Middle East, as the world now awaits Israel's response.
And U.S. President Joe Biden, Vice President and presidential candidate Kamala Harris, and former President and presidential candidate Donald Trump are all giving Israel advice on which target it should or should not strike in Iran. All gave clear statements of support for Israel's right to retaliate for the over 200 ballistic missiles fired by Iran at Israel last week, but sharp differences on tactics. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
It would be expected that potential targets of an expected Israeli retaliatory strike on Iran would only be discussed behind closed doors and in strict secrecy. But this is presidential election season in the U.S., and the current president, vice president, and former president all made their views known. Vice President and Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris wants Israel to ensure the safety of Iranian civilians.
As I have said, I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself against Iran and Iran-backed terrorist militias. My commitment to the security of Israel is unwavering. And let us be clear, Iran is not only a threat to Israel, Iran is also a threat to American personnel in the region, American interests, and innocent civilians across the region who suffer at the hands of Iran-based and backed terrorist proxies.
President Biden advised Israel not to attack Iranian nuclear sites, and in his latest public comment, he advised Israel against hitting oil fields. He also advised Israel against meddling in U.S. politics.
The Israelis have not concluded what they're going to do in terms of a strike. That's under discussion. I think if I were in their shoes, I'd be thinking about other alternatives than striking oil fields. No administration has helped Israel more than I have. None. 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 And I think Bibi should remember that. And whether he's trying to influence the election or not, I don't know, but I'm not counting on that.
Former President and Republican candidate Donald Trump told Israel to go for the nukes.
They asked him, what do you think about Iran? Would you hit Iran? And he goes, as long as they don't hit the nuclear stuff. That's the thing you want to hit, right? I said, I think he's got that one wrong. Isn't that what you're supposed to hit? I mean, it's the biggest risk we have. Nuclear weapons, the power of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. But when they asked him that question, the answer should have been, hit the nuclear first and worry about the rest later. And that's what they should. If they're going to do it.
And joining us now with more on the Israeli retaliation on the Islamic Republic of Iran is Brigadier General in the Reserves Amir Avivi, founder and CEO of Israel's Defense and Security Forum. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So last week marked the second time that Iran directly attacked Israel, firing over 200 ballistic missiles. Israel is now gearing up to respond. And before we discuss Israel's response, I want to ask, are these the opening salvos of the first Iran-Israel war?
I think we are on the first Iran-Israel war since the 7th of October. Everything we are experiencing is Iran. It's all Iranian militias. It's all Iranian planning, funding, directing. It's all one big Iranian army, whether it's Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah, militias in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, and Iran itself. We have been in a war with Iran from the very beginning, from the 7th of October.
And let's talk now about the Israeli response. The last time Iran directly attacked Israel back in April, Israel's response was to send a message. Well, it seems Iran did not receive that message. So what will an Israeli response likely entail this time around?
So in April, the main leading strategy of Israel was to focus on Gaza. We decided on the 7th of October that we're going to be on the offensive in Gaza and on the defense on all other fronts. And it was with the intention to release as many hostages as possible, to really dismantle Hamas as a terror army. And this we achieved, at least dismantling Hamas as a terror army, we achieved in the last 11 months. And a few weeks ago, it was clear that it's time to shift the center of gravity from Gaza to the north and the east. And we launched this attack on Hezbollah. So now that we see that we're managing to really also dismantle Hezbollah pretty fast, and we managed to destroy most of their long-range capabilities, this is our moment to focus on Iran. And it's not about a ping-pong game or tennis, them shooting and then us shooting. It's not about that. It's about an historical opportunity to deal with the biggest threat of all, the nuclear plans of Iran. And this is what we need to deal with. We need to seize the moment. We need to seize the moment and really deal with this threat that is an existential threat in the future for the state of Israel.
Mm-hmm. And yet there's a lot of international pressure on Israel not to attack Iran's oil or, as you said, its nuclear sites. But if Israel has the opportunity to set back Iran's nuclear program, shouldn't it take this opportunity now? And how likely is Israel to do so?
Every time we had a moment where we had to deal with a nuclear threat, whether it was Iraq, whether it was Syria, the U.S. always was against. And after we did that, they said, thank you for doing that, and they realized it was the right decision. And even talking about the attack against Nasrallah, at the beginning, before that, they wanted a ceasefire. Once we did that, President Biden said how good it was that we took out Nasrallah. So Israel needs to do what's good for Israel. Israel needs to try and really get the U.S. on board and also Europe. But it's our moment. This is an historical moment. We need to really set back these nuclear plans. And I'm not sure we'll have another opportunity. So we need to really take the moment and do that.
And so your assessment is that Israel will likely target Iran's nuclear facilities, or are there other targets that it may choose to strike?
So Israel can strike leadership. They can strike the nuclear sites. They can also strike the infrastructure of Iran, the oil refineries. But really, the biggest threat is the nuclear side. So I would really focus on dealing with what everyone in the world can understand, why it's done. Dealing with these sites and not necessarily other things, maybe the leadership also. I understand the considerations in the West, in the US, about the oil and the prices and before elections. So it's a difficult decision. It's not easy these days to be prime minister or in the cabinet of Israel.
All right, Brigadier General in the Reserves, Amir Avivi, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
My pleasure.
And the IDF ground operation is advancing into additional villages in South Lebanon, confronting Hezbollah fighters and destroying terror infrastructures. The Air Force is conducting heavy strikes in Beirut and elsewhere, degrading Hezbollah missiles and launchers. At the same time, Hezbollah is firing heavy rocket barrages deep into northern Israel. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
The IDF ground operation in South Lebanon is advancing into more Hezbollah-controlled towns inside Lebanon, near the Israeli border. The army says that more than 440 Hezbollah operatives have been killed in the Israeli military operations in South Lebanon since IDF troops began the ground offensive along the border on Tuesday. The IDF described the operation as limited, targeted raids to destroy Hezbollah infrastructure along the border in the villages closest to the Israeli border communities. Prime Minister Netanyahu summed up the IDF accomplishments against Hezbollah so far.
חיסלנו את נסראללה ואת צמרת חיזבאללה, חיסלנו את מפקדי כוח רדואן שתכננו לפלוש לגליל, לבצע באזרחינו טבח גדול יותר, נורא יותר, מזה של ה-7 באוקטובר. השמדנו חלק גדול ממערך הטילים והרקטות שחיזבאללה בנה במשך שנים. ובימים אלה, חיילינו הגיבורים משמידים את מערך המנהרות, מנהרות הטרור שחיזבאללה הכין בסתר בצמוד לגבולנו. אף שעדיין לא השלמנו את הסרת האיום, באופן ברור שינינו את מהלך המלחמה ואת מאזן המלחמה, ועוד ידנו נטויה.
The army discovered terror tunnels, including one that was over 3 kilometers long, that was used to transport arms to Hezbollah from Syria. A Fox News reporter escorted Israeli troops into the terror tunnel used to smuggle Iranian weapons from Syria.
We're embedded with an elite commando unit that just arrived at this Hezbollah position, carved into the side of a mountain. It's in tunnels and rooms like this the Israelis say they are finding Iranian weapons that were smuggled first to Syria and then into southern Lebanon. They are conducting these limited raids across the border to destroy these Hezbollah positions and allow Israeli civilians to return to their homes in the northern part of the country.
There have been losses in the Lebanon operation. 9 officers and soldiers have been killed during clashes with Hezbollah inside Lebanon. While the army maneuvers close to the border, the Air Force launched devastating waves of attacks during the New Year's holiday and weekend. Israel has been waging one of the most intense air raids in modern warfare, leaving parts of Hezbollah-controlled South Lebanon in ruins and forcing tens of thousands of people to flee. The Air Force has been degrading Hezbollah missiles and missile launchers in South Lebanon and in the Bekaa Valley, and targeting Hezbollah leadership in Beirut. Among those targeted in a massive blast in the Lebanese capital is Hashem Safieddine, the nephew of assassinated Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and potential successor. He was reportedly targeted while meeting Hezbollah commanders in an underground bunker and is now presumed dead. Today and throughout the holiday weekend, Hezbollah fired hundreds of rockets into Israel, with most shot down or falling harmlessly, but with some causing damage but no casualties. Israeli population centers were required to shelter repeatedly as Hezbollah fired into northern Israel, including the cities of Haifa, Carmiel, Tzfat, Nazareth, and reaching the upper and lower Galilee. This morning, the Navy intercepted 3 drones in the Mediterranean Sea. They have yet to announce where the drones came from.
And nearly a year has passed since the tragic events of October 7th, yet the pain endures. We invite you to register for our virtual memorial event with Israel Bonds on October 7th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time or 9 a.m. Pacific Time, where we will remember the innocent lives lost and honor the resilience of our people. Let's take a look.
October 7th has galvanized Israel-bound supporters around the world like never before.
I got my confidence back by hearing those great stories of the commanders and the warriors in the fields.
He did his utmost in order to save life, and he did. He did.
I know I have a mission. I promised my parents to bring him back, and I just can't stop until he is back.
We stand united, and we will do our part to ensure that another October 7th will never happen again.
Today is the last chance to register the event. Scan the QR code on the side of the screen to take part. And as the ground war spreads into Lebanon, the year-long war in Gaza is ongoing with the new ground operation announced today. The multi-front war includes Judea and Samaria with a major anti-terror airstrike, while Tel Aviv mourns those lost in a mass terrorist shooting. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
The IDF launched a fresh ground operation today to counter Hamas attempts to regroup in Jabalia. The army is preparing to evacuate large areas of northern Gaza to confront remaining Hamas operatives. Over the weekend, the IDF announced the death of Rahi Mushtaha, head of the Hamas government in the Gaza Strip. Mushtaha was Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar's right-hand man and one of his closest associates. Also killed by an airstrike was the notorious Aziz Salcha. Salcha was infamous for his role in the lynching of 2 Israeli soldiers in Ramallah in the year 2000, coming at the start of the Second Intifada. In what has become a rare occurrence, Hamas fired 2 rockets from Gaza at southern Israel, aimed at border communities of Kisufim and Ein HaShlosha. One of the rockets was intercepted by air defense and the other fell in an open area, causing no injury or damage. Over the weekend, the IDF rescued a Yazidi woman in Gaza who was kidnapped by ISIS from Iraq in 2014 and trafficked to Gaza. Fauchi Amin Sido was extracted by the IDF and reunited with her family. Turning to Samaria, where a rare Israeli fighter jet attack was carried out by the Air Force. The strike in Tulkarem targeted Hamas commander Tzachi al-Razik Ufi along with 6 other operatives. A total of 18 people were killed in the strike. According to the army, Ufi was planning a terror attack in the immediate time frame in the first anniversary of October 7th. They called Ufi a ticking time bomb. The 7 victims of Tuesday's terrorist shooting in Tel Aviv-Yafo have been laid to rest. Tel Aviv residents have been visiting the scene of the attack, the light rail station, in order to pay respects. 2 terrorists from Hebron opened fire with automatic weapons. The killing spree came just as Israelis were about to shelter from the Iranian missile attack and before the start of the New Year holiday.
And French President Emmanuel Macron is the latest Western leader to call for a partial arms embargo against Israel. France is not a major arms supplier to Israel, providing only roughly $30 million in arms sales. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reacted harshly, calling his decision shameful. The details in the following report. French President Emmanuel Macron has called on France to halt the shipments to Israel of arms used in the Gaza war.
Et lorsque nous demandons des cessez-le-feu, c'est le cas pour Gaza, ça a aussi été le cas pour le Liban la semaine dernière, eh bien, nous tâchons de ne pas demander un cessez-le-feu tout en continuant à livrer les armes de la guerre.
Macron said securing a ceasefire in Gaza was a priority to allow for a political solution that will ensure peace and security for all. He then reiterated his support for a 2-state solution. Macron also called for a ceasefire with Hezbollah and said France would hold an aid conference to secure humanitarian aid for Lebanon. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Saturday night responded to Macron's call as shameful.
As Israel fights the forces of barbarism led by Iran, all civilized countries should be standing firmly by Israel's side. Yet President Macron and some other Western leaders are now calling for an arms embargo against Israel. Shame on them. Is Iran imposing an arms embargo on Hezbollah, on the Houthis, on Hamas, and on its other proxies? Of course not. The axis of terror stands together. But countries who supposedly oppose this terror axis call for an arms embargo on Israel. What a disgrace. Well, let me tell you this. Israel will win with or without their support, but their shame will continue long after the war is won.
And the French president wasn't the only foreign dignitary slammed by Israel this past week. Foreign Minister Israel Katz announced that UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is persona non grata in Israel and banned him from entering the country. In a tweet, the foreign minister said that anyone who cannot unequivocally condemn Iran's heinous attack on Israel, as almost every country in the world has done, does not deserve to step foot on Israeli soil. He added that Guterres is a Secretary General who has yet to denounce the massacre and sexual atrocities committed by Hamas murderers on October 7th, nor has he led any effort to declare them a terrorist organization. Katz said Guterres will be remembered as a stain on the history of the United Nations. And tomorrow marks 1 year since the October 7th massacre, a day the country has long dreaded. Though a year has passed, we find ourselves still waiting for the return of 101 hostages, all while in the midst of a multi-front war. ILTV's Ariella Lechiani is at Hostages Square now with more.
As we approach 1 year since the devastating Hamas attacks on October 7th, Israel finds itself 365 days deep into the ongoing war. The conflict has claimed the lives of over 3,500 Israelis, with 200 to 250,000 residents evacuated from their homes due to ongoing threats in both the north and the south. The families of 101 hostages who have been held captive in Gaza for nearly a year now continue to demand action from the government as they go frustrated by the lack of progress in securing the return of their loved ones. Their anguish is compounded by few updates and ongoing uncertainty. Today, thousands of memorials will be held nationwide, not only for the victims of October 7th, but also for the 726 IDF soldiers who fell defending Israel. As Israel mourns, we stand united, but the toll of the war weighs heavily on all of us.
Sagot Winery, where passion meets tradition. Nestled in the heart of Binyamin, our vineyards yield exquisite wines, crafted with generations of expertise.
And now, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Partly cloudy skies are expected tonight around the country as temperatures reach lows of around 21 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, mostly sunny skies and warm weather as expected, as temperatures should climb to highs of 29 degrees Celsius or 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladar Gravelazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.